Hello gamers, Matt with That's Fair Podcasting, and in this video today I'm going to kind of bring back another 80s nostalgic feel, and I think that much of you Gen Xers out there, even farther back with boomers, and maybe some again, the late onset millennials will remember the 80s video game Craze, and it went from walking to the arcade with pocketfuls of quarters or literal home gaming systems such as the Atari and Nintendo, so stay tuned. What video game comes to mind when you think back and reminisce on walking to the arcade with quarters in your pockets? Again, this is Matt with That's Fair Podcasting, and if you guys have a moment, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Maybe like this video as always to help us with that YouTube algorithm, or just simply thank you for just watching the video. That's really what matters to me the most, and I sincerely appreciate it. But today I want to talk about the 80s retro video games and where to me it really started, for me. And by that, I mean, I remember walking with my cousin Sebastian. We'd go to what was called Stubman Village. There was an arcade there. And I remember just pocketfuls of quarters blowing over $20 each, which in the 80s, that was kind of a lot of money when you're a kid. That could have been better spent on comic books or G.I. Joes, but we gamed a lot. So that's what it was all about. And I gotta ask, when you think of those old retro arcades, what's the first video game that comes to mind? Many will say Pac-Man or Miss Pac-Man. Many say Donkey Kong. Some will say Centipede. You remember Tempest? Hey, these games were awesome. I just remember getting lost in these arcades. And don't even get me started. If you remember the familiar old retro feeling of being in an arcade, don't forget the smells from people smoking when they weren't even old enough back then. You'd smell cigarette smokes, body odor. You'd smell Aquanet hairspray. You'd smell popcorn, nachos, anything. But it was that old arcade smell and the sounds in the background that I remember it was a magical time to be alive in the 80s for arcades. And I remember my first real experience was the original Pac-Man by Bally Midway. I don't remember when it actually came out, 80 or 81. I just remember that's my first impression of a video game was the original Pac-Man. Dropping that quarter in the machine and it going, and then all of a sudden you got the music going, opening music, and everyone always developed a pattern. I always went left, down, and then around. Everyone had a pattern. You'd start getting used to dropping more and more quarters in these machines, and these patterns kept you playing these games over and over. And this was before video games would make you keep feeding quarters just to keep it going. You could play a game for forever on one quarter. And I remember being surprised in another arcade when Miss Pac-Man finally came out, and I ended up using the same pattern, going down and around, and it worked because I don't know if the same ghosts were copy and pasted in their movements and whatnot, but I just remember Bally Midway blew it away with Pac-Man, and they even had a song, Pac-Man Fever. That's a horrible song. But I just remember this 80s arcade, and I remember playing Donkey Kong as your Mario, jumping barrels, trying to rescue the princess. And look what transpired just from Donkey Kong, from Mario to Mario Kart, Mario World with the Nintendo, and we'll get to that in the 80s aspect of it. But I just remember these arcades like playing Centipede. And you guys remember Paperboy? I remember playing Paperboy, trying to aim that newspaper, the mailbox or the front porch, or and then there was Cubert, and you just had all these games from Frogger, and these games ultimately found their way to the Atari 2600 by means of cartridges and joysticks. And I didn't get my first Atari 2600 till Christmas of '82. I was 10 years old. I'm that old. And I remember getting Pac-Man, and it was just a horrible rendition. It was terrible. And I remember playing Frogger, and you had the little paddles with the wheels, and you were playing Kaboom. And I'm reminiscing, and I'm getting excited because this is what really started the video game craze for me. And as I stand here at 53 years old, I'm still a massive gamer. I'll never give it up. I'll game until I'm dead, maybe even beyond. But I just remember these arcade games evolving, and you'd ultimately bring them home to these video game systems, these home entertainment systems. Like, do you guys remember like there were so many of them, like Spy Hunter, and you had like Safari Hunt where you're swinging on these vines, and then ultimately you had, I forgot what it was called, Dragon Quest, or you had this one that was literally a cartoon. I don't remember the name of it, but I'll have it up in the video. But anyway, these video games found their way to the Atari 2600 and then ultimately the Nintendo. But I remember the Atari 2600 playing Pac-Man, playing with my grandma. She was getting sucked into video games. And I remember my dad had a temper where some joysticks, you had the one stick with the red button. I remember a lot of those getting destroyed out of anger. And I started to follow suit with that gaming rage. And I did it a lot in a game called Pitfall for the Atari. I think it was ultimately the Intellivision, but don't quote me on that. I just remember playing Pitfall and finally realizing you can't just jump on the alligators or you'll fall through when they open their mouths. You have to jump on the tops of their skulls to stay still. And long story short, it was just a good retro video game. And then you had some other shooter games like Contra and Commando. So the 80s arcade games really brought about what the home entertainment systems could bring to the forefront as well. I remember I gamed even on what was called the Commodore 64, and I played specific video games like Moebius. You're this like ninja, and you're like traversing across this land, and it was a weird game, but it was kind of fun. And I remember playing, I don't remember the name, but it's a medieval game where you had to joust. Defender of the Crown, that's what that one was called. And so some of my best experiences were on the Commodore 64, but when the Nintendo finally dropped and it came out with the games that it came out, like Excite Bike, and you had 10-yard fight. I mean, I was heavy into sports, obviously, football and martial arts, but I loved the sports games that came out. There was even a wrestling game where I was the Purple Star Man. I don't remember the name of the game, but anyway, I'm obviously having a game-gasm, so to speak, talking about these, because if it weren't for those games, I don't think we'd be where we're at now with specific video games. I can't really speak for the BioWares or the Bethesdas of the world, but I do know that Bali Midway was my first real impression of video games with the Pac-Mans and whatever else that they spit out. But, again, those 80s arcade games, I remember moving a little farther, probably around 86, 87, playing my first time at Double Dragon with me and my cousin Sebastian. We're playing Double Dragon and we're fighting our way through it, and we're surviving on just these quarters that we each put in a quarter, if I remember correctly. And we're playing this whole game, and then at the end it pits you against yourselves. And that sucked because he and I we were big babies, which we still are. And I remember he and I would, we'd have to fight. It was a pretty even thing. He would pick up the bat and just billy club the shit out of me. Or I'd have this elbow move where it was just almost impossible to stop. And I lived and died by the elbow move. I ultimately I did win with the elbow move. But yeah, Double Dragon was a good one. And I think if it weren't for Double Dragon, we probably wouldn't have the likes of Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and Tekken. Just an opinion, maybe I'm wrong, but I just remember these influences. And getting back to the sports games on the Nintendo, you had 10-yard fight, you had Pole Position was a racing game. I don't remember if that was on the Nintendo or not. It might have been, I don't remember. But I mean, going from the Atari to the Nintendo, the NES, was just a completely night and day difference. And I remember being a kid with the Nintendo thinking, man, the graphics are never going to get that good. Shock of shocks, they will. And again, I brought up Spy Hunter, and I believe that was on the Nintendo, but I'm drawing kind of a blank. But you had Choplifter and Excite Bike. And anyway, the sports games that came along, especially for the Commodore 64, you had 4th and Inches. Who remembers that? I do. And I just know that thinking back and recollecting on the 80s vibe that it gave me, I sincerely miss the vibe of the 1980s with the video games. Like, again, I can't stress it enough. You walk into the arcade, the sounds and the smells are the things that every once in a while you'll pass by something and you'll get a nostalgic smell that'll remind you of an arcade, or, like the sounds, like some crazy sounds when me and my wife go to Vegas. We're in a casino and I hear the slots all around me. It kind of reminds me of video games in a weird way, which obviously a lot of it's video poker, and a lot of machines are based a lot like a video game. Only video games didn't pay you. They took your money like these machines, but they didn't pay you. I get my ass kicked every time I go to Vegas. But anyway, I feel like this retro style video game, it's led us to where we are today. And, I've talked in the past about the AAA gaming industry and how badly it lacks now. There are some games out there like Claire Obscure and some other games, that Tainted Grail. I'm going to give it a shot. I haven't played it yet, but me and my wife are currently playing 7 Days to Die 1.0, patiently waiting for the 2.0 to drop. And I'm about to start a Twitch stream of my own, so that'll be kind of interesting. But anyway, guys, I just wanted to talk mainly this time, no offense to the younger crowd, but the boomers, the Gen X, and the older millennials. You guys remember the 80s nostalgia video games, from the arcade to the Atari 2600 to the Nintendo Entertainment System. And do you miss it? Although it's awfully hard to go back and play those games now, I just know that it set the tone to where I am at today as a gamer. And if it weren't for those 80s nostalgic video games, I don't think any of us gamers would be where we are today. But that's all I had today. Thank you so much for listening to this pointless rant. Again, if you don't mind taking the time to subscribe to That's Fair Podcasting, like the video, help us get more views, help us grow. And, I sincerely appreciate it. If you don't do any of those and you just stuck with me this long, thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it. And as I always say to all you gamers, all love to you, and I am outro.